The bandits in the tower were professionals. That was the first thing I noticed. They had established overlapping fields of fire from the two arrow slits, and the approach was seeded with caltrops hidden under a thin layer of dust and pine needles. A tripwire low to the ground and tied to a rack of throwing spears guarded the door. This was not the work of desperate men who had just taken to the road. These were former soldiers, likely from the losing side of some forgotten skirmish in the Great War. Men who knew their trade. Amateurs built forts. Professionals built traps. My name is Stenvar Stonefist, and my trade is managing threats. Hakkar One-Eye, the man they call Dragonborn, his trade was being one. He stood beside me, his horned iron helmet hiding the ruined side of his face, studying the tower with an impatient energy that radiated from him like heat from a forge. He saw a stone box with men inside. I saw a tactical problem. That was the nature of our arrangement, an arrangement brokered by Jarl Balgruuf the Greater himself after the business with the dragon at the western watchtower. The Jarl had looked at Hakkar, this whirlwind of shouts and fury, and decided he needed a leash, or at least a handler. Lydia was capable, a good shield maiden for a city thane, but she lacked the field experience for what was coming. I was assigned to Hakkar not to protect him but to direct him, to keep the force of nature aimed at the enemies of Skyrim and not at its marketplaces or its citizens. It was a job I understood. I pointed with the blade of my axe. 2 archers, I said, 1 in each window. The one on the left has a better angle on the path, so we deal with him first. The tripwire is 6 feet from the doorframe. We will not be using the door. He grunted, a sound of acknowledgement that meant he was still listening. He had a habit of ceasing to listen without warning. My job was to give him the plan before the silence fell. The north wall is weaker, I continued. The mortar is crumbling where the winter runoff pools. Your voice should be enough to bring a section of it down. We go through the breach. They will be disorganized, expecting an assault on the door. We will be on them before they can reform their line. It was a good plan. It used his unique strength to bypass their preparations. It minimized our exposure and maximized their confusion. This was how we worked. I provided the strategy, he provided the overwhelming force. He was the hammer. I was the hand that aimed the swing. He nodded, a short, sharp gesture. He faced the north wall, took a deep breath that seemed to pull the very air from the surrounding pines, and let out the first word of unrelenting force. Fus. The sound hit the stone not like a thunderclap, but like a giant's fist. The wall bulged inward, groaning. Cracks spiderwebbed across the surface. Dust rained down from the parapet. Inside, I heard shouts of alarm, the scrape of boots on stone. They knew something was wrong. Hakkar did not give them time to figure it out. Row. The second word was a physical blow. A section of the wall the size of a carriage door blew inward in a shower of stone and ancient mortar. Da. The final word cleared the opening, sending a shockwave through the tower that threw the bandits inside off their feet. I was moving before the echo faded, my shield up, my axe held low. This was the critical moment. The plan was the easy part. Execution was everything. I vaulted through the jagged opening, landing in a crouch on the ground floor. 2 bandits were scrambling to their feet, their swords half drawn. Another was trying to untangle himself from a collapsed weapons rack. My shield caught the first man under the chin, snapping his head back with a wet crunch. I did not check to see him fall. My axe was already moving, biting deep into the shoulder of the second man as he brought his own weapon up. He screamed, a high, thin sound that was cut short as Hakkar landed behind me, his Daedric mace a black star of wicked flanges in the dim light. The mace fell, and the bandit's scream ended. The third man, the one by the rack, finally got his bearings. He was smarter than the others. He ignored Hakkar, the obvious and terrifying threat, and came for me. He knew I was the anchor. A good call, but a late one. I planted my feet, letting him charge. His swing was wide and desperate. I caught the blow on my shield, the impact a familiar thud that vibrated up my arm. My shield was a part of me, a slab of layered steel with the crest of my family inlaid in moonsilver, carried by my father in the war and by me for 20 years since. It had turned blades from Cyrodiil to the Reach. I absorbed the bandit's momentum, then used it, rotating my body and shoving him off balance. He stumbled sideways, his guard open for a fatal second. My axe took him in the ribs. He went down, clutching the wound, and did not get up. Hakkar was already on the stairs, his heavy boots pounding on the wood. I heard a brief, frantic skirmish from above, then a choked cry, then silence. I did a quick sweep of the ground floor. A chest, locked. A table with some stale bread and a few bottles of cheap ale. I ignored them. My focus was on the tactical situation. I reloaded my crossbow, checked the tension on the string, and retrieved my throwing axes from the bodies. You never left good steel behind. When I was done, I moved to the base of the stairs, covering Hakkar's back. He came down a moment later, wiping his mace on a dead bandit's tunic. "That is the last of them," he said. His voice was a low rumble, always sounding like it was coming from a deeper place than a man's chest. I scanned the upper floor from my position. 2 bodies. The archers. The situation was secure. I found the leader on the top floor. He had better armor, a steel plate cuirass over boiled leather, and an orcish sword. He had died near a small makeshift desk where a map was laid, out detailing caravan routes through Whiterun Hold. A list of names was pinned to the map. Local merchants, farmers, targets. I rolled the map up and tucked it into my pack. This would go to the Jarl's steward, Proventus Avenici. Information was as valuable as gold. More sometimes. Hakkar was not interested. He was prying the gems out of the hilt of the dead leader's sword with the point of his dagger. He valued things he could hold, things that glittered. We were a good team. He saw the treasure, I saw the threat. Together we missed very little. We descended the tower and I retrieved the caltrops from the path, carefully placing them in a leather pouch. They could be used again. Waste was a weakness. As Hakkar looted the bodies for loose septums, I checked my gear. The edge of my axe was still true. My shield had a new scratch, a deep gouge in the steel near the boss, but it was cosmetic. The integrity of the shield was sound. I ran a whetstone along the axe blade anyway, the rhythmic scrape of stone on steel, a calming ritual. A sharp blade meant a quick death for your enemy and a safer journey home for you. It was a simple truth my father had taught me, and it had kept me alive for a long time. Hakkar watched me, his one good eye reflecting the cold Skyrim sky. "You and that shield," he grunted. He did not understand. To him, gear was disposable, replaceable. He found enchanted weapons in every ancient tomb we explored. For me, my shield was a legacy. It was my history. It was the tool of my trade, and I knew its every balance point, every dent, every inch of its surface. I knew exactly how much punishment it could take. It had never failed me. Our work at the tower was done. The bandits were dead. Their plans were in my satchel, and their valuables were in Hakkar's. I took one last look around, my eyes scanning the tree line, checking for any threats we might have missed. The woods were still. The only sound was the wind. I was satisfied. The job was clean. We had taken a prepared position with overwhelming force and tactical surprise, suffering no injuries and expending minimal resources. It was a professional operation. I was good at my job, and Hakkar, for all his savagery, was good at his. As long as I could keep him pointed in the right direction, we could secure Skyrim. I was sure of it. The Dwemer ruin was deep, a festering brass wound in the side of the mountain. Hakkar was looking for something, a piece of a staff for that mad wizard Arniel Gain at the College of Winterhold. I did not like these places. They were all humming pipes and unsettling silence, broken by the shriek of metal on metal. The air was thick with the smell of old oil and decay. The Falmer were a constant threat, but the true danger was the automatons. They did not feel pain. They did not feel fear. They did not bleed. They were just machines built for killing, and they were very, very good at it. We had cleared the outer chambers, dispatching Falmer, skirmishers, and a few of the lesser constructs, the metal spiders. I had found their patterns easy enough to read. They had a rhythm to their attacks, a predictable sequence. But then we entered the main forge chamber, and the floor began to shake. A section of the wall slid away, and a dwarven centurion lumbered out. It was immense, a 10-foot giant of riveted brass and steaming pistons. Its movements were slow but unstoppable. I had fought these before. The key was to stay mobile, wear them down, and stay away from their steam attacks. My job was to keep its attention while Hakkar worked on its joints with that Daedric mace of his. I raised my shield and banged my axe against it, a sharp clang that echoed through the chamber. "Hey, brasshead!" I yelled. "Over here!" The centurion's head, a blank metal face with glowing blue crystal eyes, swiveled towards me. It took a heavy step, its metal feet grinding on the stone floor. It was working. It saw me as the primary threat. Hakkar was staggering. It was like being hit by a huge hammer arm. I met the blow with my shield. The impact was staggering. It was like being hit by a falling tree. My whole body shuddered, and my shield arm screamed in protest, but the shield held. My shield always held. I grunted, held my ground, and prepared for the follow-up attack, a sweep from its axe arm. But Hakkar got impatient. He was in position, but he did not want to spend the time chipping away at the centurion's armored legs. He wanted it done now. He stepped out from behind a pillar, planted his feet, and shouted, "Fusro da!" The unrelenting force hit the centurion square in the chest. The construct stumbled back a step, its metal torso dented, but it was too massive to be thrown. The shout, however, was not aimed perfectly. The cone of force was wide, and I was caught on its edge. It felt like a giant's invisible hand had slapped me aside. I was lifted from my feet and thrown backward through the air. I slammed into a wall of solid brass pipes with bone-jarring force. The world went white for a second. My head rang like a bell. I slid to the floor, dazed. My first thought was for my shield. I looked at my arm. The shield was a ruin. The force of the impact against the wall had done what no sword or axe or hammer ever could. It had bent the steel core. The entire shield was warped into a concave dish, the layers of metal peeling apart at the edges. A huge crack ran right through my family's moon-silver crest, splitting it in two. It was completely and utterly wrecked. It was scrap metal. For a moment, I just stared at it. 20 years. Countless battles. Broken by my own charge, by a careless shout. Hakkar did not even seem to notice. He was using the opening to attack the off-balance centurion, his mace crashing against its leg joints with furious rhythmic blows. Metal screamed. Pistons hissed. I shook my head, trying to clear it, and scrambled to my feet. My arm was numb, but I did not think it was broken. I unstrapped the ruined shield and let it fall to the floor with a mournful clang. I drew my second axe from my belt. Two-weapon fighting was not my style. I was a shield man. My entire technique was built around the shield bash, the block and counter. Without it, I felt naked. The centurion was turning its attention back to Hakkar now. I had to get back in the fight. I charged, my two axes a desperate flurry of blows against its back. The steel was too thick. My axes just scraped and bounced off. I was doing nothing. The centurion ignored me, focusing on Hakkar, who was now dodging its steam attacks. Eventually, Hakkar's relentless assault paid off. He shattered the centurion's knee joint, and the great machine listed to one side. Then he brought his mace down on its head again and again until the glowing crystals of its eyes went dark and it collapsed to the floor in a heap of silent, steaming metal. "Hakkar, a shield," he said, his voice dismissive. "A shield," he said, his voice dismissive. "We will find another." He kicked at the wreckage with his boot. This one was old anyway. He did not understand. He could not understand. He walked over to the chest the centurion had been guarding and started working the lock. I walked back to my shield. I picked it up. The metal was cold. The two halves of my family crest no longer aligned. It was not just old. It was my story. It was the thing that had kept me alive, and now it was gone. I left it there on the cold brass floor of that Dwemer ruin. I could not bring myself to carry the pieces. Later I took a shield from a dead Falmer. It was made of chorus chitin, and it was light and flimsy. It felt like a toy in my hand. The balance was all wrong. When I blocked a blow, it vibrated unpleasantly and the rim buckled. I had to change my stance, my footwork, everything. I was clumsier now, slower to react. I started taking small hits, glancing blows that my old shield would have swallowed without a sound. Each one was a reminder of what I had lost. Hakkar did not notice the difference. To him, a shield was a shield. He had his power. He did not need to rely on mere steel. I did, and my best steel was gone. We needed a specialist. Hakkar had acquired a Daedric artifact, a black sword that seemed to drink the light from the room, and he wanted to place a soul trap enchantment on it. The court wizard in Dragon's Reach, Farengar Secret Fire, would not touch it. He said the metal itself felt wrong, that enchanting it would require a ritual he was not comfortable performing. He pointed us towards a man named Erland, an independent wizard who had left the College of Winterhold under a cloud of suspicion. Apparently, his experiments with soul gems were considered unorthodox, even by the college's lenient standards. We found him in a shack in the swamps of Yalmarch, a place that smelled of mud and decay. Erland was a twitchy, nervous man with ink-stained fingers and eyes that darted around as if he expected the walls to attack him. He agreed to do the enchantment, but his price was steep and he needed a specific component, a filled black soul gem, a grand one. He explained, his voice a conspiratorial whisper, that Daedric metal resisted standard enchantments. It required a powerful sentient soul to anchor the magic, a human soul, or mer, or beast folk. It made no difference, only that it came from something that could think and reason. Hakkar agreed without a moment of hesitation. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I had seen plenty of killing in my time, but this was different. This was trafficking in souls, a dark business that usually ended badly for everyone involved. But my job was not to question his morals. It was to see him through his mission. We found a group of necromancers in a cave not far from Erland's shack. They were a perfect source. Nobody would miss them, and they were certainly sentient. The fight was short and brutal. Hakkar's shouts echoed off the damp cave walls, and my axe did its work. We left 4 of them dead on the cave floor. Hakkar pulled out an empty black soul gem, a rock of polished obsidian that seemed to pull the warmth from my skin, and approached the body of the lead necromancer. He held the gem over the corpse and began to chant in a low, guttural language I did not recognize. Nothing happened. He tried again, his voice louder, more forceful. Still nothing. The soul had already departed. He cursed, kicking the body in frustration. "We are too late," he growled. "Their souls are gone. We needed a fresh kill. We had no other targets. We could go back to Morthal, find some bounty, but that would take time." Hakkar was not a patient man. His one eye scanned the cave, filled with a familiar predatory light. He was looking for a solution. His gaze fell on Erland, who had accompanied us, ostensibly to ensure the soul we captured was of sufficient quality. The nervous wizard was huddled near the cave entrance, trying to make himself as small as possible. A mistake. Showing fear to a predator only triggers its instinct to hunt. "Erland," Hakkar said, his voice suddenly smooth. "You are a wizard. You understand these things. Is there no way to call the soul back?" Erland stammered, shaking his head. "No, Dragonborn. Once it has passed on to the Aetherius, it is beyond my reach. Only the most powerful of necromancers could—" He trailed off, seeing the look in Hakkar's eye. Hakkar took a step towards him. "A pity," he said. "Then your expertise is no longer required, but your soul is still here." Erland's eyes went wide with terror. He started to back away, pleading. "Please, Dragonborn, I can be of service. I can find another source. There are bandits, forsworn. We have a deal." I was standing between them, my hand on my axe. I did not move. This was not a bandit. This was a man we had hired, an employee. This was murder. I should have done something. I should have stepped in. I should have told Hakkar no. But I hesitated. For a split second, I weighed the consequences. Defy the Dragonborn? Here in this dark cave, far from any law or witness? He would kill me without a second thought. My oath was to the Jarl to serve the Thane of Whiterun, but Hakkar was more than a Thane. He was a force of nature, and you cannot stand in the way of a storm. You can only hope to survive it. My hesitation cost Erland his life. Hakkar shoved me aside, not with a shout, but with a simple, brutal push. He was on Erland in an instant. The wizard tried to cast a spell, a faint frostlight glowing around his hands, but Hakkar was too fast. The Daedric mace crushed Erland's skull. As he fell, Hakkar held the black soul gem over him. A scream, thin and ethereal, echoed in the cave, and a sickly purple light flowed from Erland's body into the gem. Then it was over. Hakkar stood up, holding the now glowing gem. He looked at me. "He was a tool," he said, as if that explained everything. His purpose was served. He turned and walked out of the cave, leaving me with the bodies. I stood there for a long time. The knot in my stomach had become a cold, heavy stone. I had watched an innocent man die. I had done nothing. I was an accomplice. I thought about my oath. Was this serving Skyrim, killing a nervous wizard to enchant a demonic sword? I no longer knew. I had lost something in that cave more than just my moral footing. I had lost the certainty that my service had a purpose. I had always been part of a unit, a shield wall, a war band. We looked out for each other. Hakkar had just shown me that to him everyone was a tool, including me. I was just another resource to be consumed. The fight with the Forsworn in the Reach was a disaster. It should have been a simple clearing of a roadblock, a handful of wild men with axes made of bone and feathers. But I was not the same fighter I had been. The chitin shield was next to useless, and my confidence was gone. I fought defensively, timidly. I was so focused on protecting myself that I failed to see the archer on the ridge above us. I heard the hiss of the arrow an instant before it hit. It struck me in the left thigh, punching through the leather of my trousers. The pain was sharp, a hot spike of agony. I grunted and stumbled back, trying to pull the shaft out. The arrowhead was barbed. It would not budge. Hakkar killed the archer with a fire-breath shout, incinerating the entire ridge in a gout of orange flame. He did not seem concerned about my injury. He was busy with the Briarheart who led the war party. I managed to snap the arrow shaft, but the head was still buried deep in my leg. A green, oily substance coated the barbs. Poison. I could feel it already, a cold numbness spreading through my limb, my muscles beginning to seize up. I leaned against a rock, trying to stay on my feet, but my leg would not support my weight. I slid to the ground. The world was starting to spin. By the time Hakkar finished the last of the Forsworn, I was pale and sweating, my leg a dead weight. He came over and looked down at me. "Just a scratch," he said. He handed me a healing potion. I drank it. The magic knitted the flesh of the wound together, but it did little for the poison. That would take time to work its way out of my system. Hakkar hauled me to my feet and I leaned on him as we made our way back to Markarth. The healer at the Temple of Dibella did what she could. She told me the poison was from a rare breed of Chorus hunter, one the Forsworn sometimes managed to tame. She said I was lucky to be alive, but the damage was done. The poison had settled in the muscle and bone of my leg. I would walk again, she said, but I would always have a limp, always. My days of charging into days of shield wall were over. My speed, my agility, it was all gone. I was a cripple. Hakkar bought me a horse for the journey back to Whiterun. He seemed to think that solved the problem. He did not understand that a warrior's legs are his foundation. Without them, he is nothing. My job had been to control the battlefield, to move, to flank, to create openings. Now I could only stand my ground. I had become a stationary turret, a living wall of steel and flesh. My role was reduced to simply absorbing damage meant for him. I was no longer his partner. I was his shield, a disposable damaged shield. We were in Markarth, the city of stone, to deal with some business for the Silverblood family. Hakkar was now Thane of the Reach, an honor he had earned by clearing out a forsworn mine for Thongvor Silverblood. The title meant little to him, other than a way to avoid consequences. We were in the marketplace when the argument started. It was over something trivial. A merchant, a man named Lisbeth, who ran the trading post, accused Hakkar of shortchanging her on a sale of dwarven ingots. She was a fiery woman, and she was not intimidated by his reputation. She called him a cheat to his face. In the past, I would have handled this. As his housecarl, it was my duty to be his public face, to smooth over these sorts of disputes. I would have stepped forward, spoken to Lisbeth calmly, checked the figures, and resolved the situation with diplomacy. My word, as the sworn sword of a Thane, carried weight. But things were different now. My confidence was gone, and my limp made me feel weak, exposed. Before I could even open my mouth, Hakkar took over. He did not argue. He did not negotiate. He leaned in close to Lisbeth, his one eye boring into her. "Do you know who I am?" he snarled. Lisbeth, to her credit, did not back down. "I know you are a man who owes me 10 septums, she shot back. That was a mistake. Hakkar's face darkened. He used the thuum, not a full shout, just a whisper, but one. Fight went out of Lisbeth's eyes. Fight went out of Lisbeth's eyes. They glazed over, her expression going slack. "Yes, my Thane," she said, her voice a monotone. "Forgive me. I made a mistake." The crowd that had gathered to watch the confrontation murmured in fear and awe. They did not understand what they had just seen, but they knew it was not natural. Hakkar was not satisfied. He wanted to make an example. He drew his ebony dagger. "No one cheats me," he said, and slit her throat. Lisbeth collapsed behind her stall, a pool of blood spreading across the stone floor. The marketplace erupted in chaos. People screamed and ran. The city guard came running, their shields up and swords drawn. The captain, a grim-faced Nord named Caius, confronted us. "By the stone, Thane, what have you done?" he demanded. "This is murder." I finally found my voice. I stepped forward, or rather, I hobbled forward, placing myself between Hakkar and the guards. My leg throbbed with the effort. "Captain Caius," I said, trying to project an authority I no longer felt. "This was a tragic misunderstanding. We can resolve this peacefully. There are protocols for a Thane's conduct. We will report to the Jarl." Hakkar laughed. A harsh, ugly sound. "He speaks for himself," he told the captain, gesturing at me with his blood-stained dagger. "A dog barking because that is what it has been taught to do. I do what I want." He then turned to the captain. "I am the Dragonborn. I am the Thane of this city. Her Jarl is in my debt. Do you really want to arrest me over the life of one loud-mouthed shopkeeper?" The captain hesitated. He looked at his men. He looked at Hakkar, at the power radiating from him. He looked at me, a crippled housecarl offering empty words. He knew he was outmatched, not just in combat, but in political power. He lowered his sword. "Go," he said, his voice thick with disgust. "Get out of my sight." Hakkar sheathed his dagger and walked away without a backward glance. I stood there for a moment, facing the guards. They looked at me not with respect, but with a mixture of pity and contempt. I was the Dragonborn's man, but I had no control over him. I had no authority of my own. I was just the shadow of a monster, a broken shield-bearer who could not even keep the peace in a marketplace. My reputation, the last thing I had that connected me to the man I used to be, was shattered. I turned and followed Hakkar, the eyes of every citizen of Markarth burning into my back. I was no longer Stenvar Stonefist, trusted veteran of the Jarl's Guard. I was just the Dragonborn's butcher's dog, limping to keep up with his master. The shame was a physical weight, heavier than any shield. I had always believed through all of it that Hakkar was a necessary evil. He was brutal, selfish, and cruel, but he was our only real weapon against Alduin. I told myself that the murder, the soul-trapping, the thuggery, it was all justified by the greater good. He was saving the world. The ends justified the means. That was the last thread of certainty I clung to. The belief that my service, my complicity, had a noble purpose. That thread snapped at Skyhaven Temple. We were there for a meeting with the Blades, Delphine and Esbern. They had been tracking dragon sightings and analyzing the text of Alduin's wall. They believed they had found the name of the dragon that had helped the ancient Nords defeat Alduin in the past. Paarthurnax. And they knew where to find him. At the peak of the throat of the world, with the Greybeards. Their plan was simple. Hakkar would go to High Hrothgar, learn what he could from the Greybeards, and then confront Paarthurnax to learn the shout needed to bring Alduin down. It was a solid, logical plan. But Hakkar had other ideas. He met with the Blades in the temple's main hall. I stood by the door, as was my custom, my hand resting on the hilt of my axe. Delphine was explaining their strategy. "We need the Dragonrend shout," she said. "Paarthurnax is the key." Hakkar listened, his one eye fixed on the ancient carvings on the wall. When she was finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke. His voice was quiet, but it filled the vast hall. "Your plan is small," he said. "You think of defeating one dragon. I think of ruling them all." Delphine and Esbern exchanged a confused look. "What are you talking about?" Delphine asked. "Alduin is the enemy." Hakkar turned to face them. "Alduin is a tyrant," he agreed. "He wishes to dominate. His mistake is in seeing mortals as cattle to be devoured. I see them as a resource to be managed." He looked directly at me. "Stenvar knows. The tool has a purpose. A soul has a use. A world has a master." Delphine drew her sword. "That sounds like madness. That sounds like the words of Miraak." Hakkar smiled. It was a chilling sight. Miraak was clever, he said. He understood true power. He just chose the wrong master. Hermaeus Mora offers knowledge. With knowledge comes control. I will defeat Alduin not to save this world, but to claim it. The dragons will not be my enemies. They will be my army. And with them I will remake this pathetic collection of squabbling holds into an empire that will last 1,000 years. Esbern was aghast. "This is heresy. The Dragonborn is a gift of Akatosh, sent to protect mankind." Hakkar laughed again, that same ugly laugh from the Markarth marketplace. "Akatosh is a faith for the weak. I have seen the pillars of creation from the inside. I have read the black books. I have spoken with the demon of knowledge. There are powers in this world far older and far stronger than your pale divines. I serve myself, and my new patron gives me the tools to do so." He held up his hand, and a sickly green light flickered around it. The power was not of the Thu'um. It was something else, something alien and wrong. In that moment, everything I had rationalized, every excuse I had made for him, it all turned to ash. He was not saving Skyrim. He was conquering it. He was not a brutal hero. He was a would-be god king, a new tyrant waiting to take Alduin's place. And I, Stenvar Stonefist, had been his loyal servant. I had held his shield, cleared his path, and stood by while he committed atrocity after atrocity, all in the name of a lie. My certainty, the bedrock of my entire life as a soldier, that my cause was just, was gone. I was not serving the Jarl. I was not serving Skyrim. I was serving a monster who saw the entire world as his property. The realization did not come with a flash of anger or a surge of defiance. It came with a profound, soul-crushing emptiness. There was nothing left to believe in. My purpose was a fraud. We were in another Nordic ruin. It felt like we were always in some dusty tomb surrounded by the dead. Hakkar was searching for another word of power, another tool for his conquest. By now, the routine was second nature. To me, I was supposed to take point, check for traps, engage the first wave of Draugr. It was a job I had once done with pride and precision. Now it was just a set of motions I went through. My body was a wreck. The limp was worse in the cold, damp air of the tomb. My shield arm ached from the poor balance of the cheap iron shield I now carried, a thing I had taken from a dead bandit weeks ago. My spirit was a hollowed-out shell. I walked ahead, my torch held high. The light cast long, dancing shadows on the stone walls. My eyes scanned the floor, looking for the telltale signs of a pressure plate. I saw one. It was obvious. A slightly raised stone, different in color from the ones around it. A younger me, a competent me, would have marked it, pointed it out to Hakkar, and we would have navigated around it. But the me of now, the empty man, just stared at it. What did it matter? What was one more trap in a life that had become nothing but? A part of me, a dark and weary part, wanted to step on it, to just let it end. I did not step on it directly, but I did not avoid it either. My mind was somewhere else, replaying the conversation at Skyhaven Temple, thinking about the look on Delphine's face. My foot, dragged by my limp, scuffed the edge of the plate. There was a click, a grinding of gears deep within the wall. I did not even have time to raise my shield. A volley of poisoned darts shot out from a hidden opening. 3 of them slammed into my chest and shoulder. The poison was fast-acting. A familiar numbness spread through me, but this time it was accompanied by a fire in my veins. My vision blurred, my legs gave out. I collapsed onto the stone floor, the torch skittering away and extinguishing itself, plunging the corridor into darkness. I heard Hakkar step around me. He did not stop to help. He did not offer a potion. I heard him laugh, a low, contemptuous chuckle in the dark. "Careless Stenvar," he said. His footsteps receded down the corridor, leaving me, alone in the black, the poison burning through me. I lay there, listening to the silence, feeling the life drain out of me. This is how it ends, I thought. Not in a glorious battle against a dragon, but alone in the dark, killed by a simple trap because I had stopped caring enough to avoid it. My service was over. My long, slow erosion was complete. I had lost my shield, my allies, my body, my authority, and finally my purpose. There was nothing left of the man who had first sworn an oath to the Thane of Whiterun. But I did not die. The poison was old. Its potency faded over the centuries. It paralyzed me, burned me, but it did not kill me. After what felt like an eternity, I was able to move again. Slowly, painfully, I got to my hands and knees. Every muscle screamed. I felt a deep, abiding cold that had nothing to do with the temperature of the tomb. I found my pack, fumbled for a potion, and drank it. It helped with the pain, but not with the cold. I got to my feet using the wall for support. My cheap iron shield was on the floor, its leather straps broken by the fall. I picked it up. It was bent now, a useless piece of scrap. I looked down the dark corridor where Hakkar had gone. I could still follow him. I could still do my job. There was nothing else. I stood in the darkness, my body a map of my failures. My leg was a dead weight. My chest was on fire from the poison's residue. My shield was broken. I tried to assume my old guard stance, the one I had held for 20 years. Feet planted, shield high, axe ready, my leg buckled. The shield, held in a trembling hand, felt impossibly heavy. I leaned on the wall, just breathing. Then I took a step, and another. I hobbled after him into the dark.